the theme of my talk, which is 21st century Pythagorean epistemology and connaissance, which is of course a French word, but it's I think we could do with it in English. So I'm going to start actually with a poem, and I'm hoping to kind of close with a poem as well, so I'll try to keep in time. So this is by someone called Thomas Tranströmer, and I haven't checked where he comes from. It's translated by John F. Dean. Tired of all who come with words, but no language, I went to the snow-covered island. The wild does not have words. The unwritten pages spread themselves out in all directions. I come across the marks of reindeer's hooves in the snow. Language, but no words. So I'm a number of things, a lot of you know these already. So just basically the basis of Pythagorean mathematics. Pythagoras coined the words mathematics and philosophy. And the term mathematics comes from the Greek, which is taumatemata, which is those things which have been learned. And the basis of that learning is the Pythagorean philosophy. And as I say, that's a Pythagorean term. And it means, here we go. So philosophy in the Greek is philosophia, and it means the wisdom of love. And this is very clear, not only from the fact that all, if you look at any Greek portmanteau words, that's to say, Greek portmanteau words that were extant in Greek times, not ones that we've put, that we've made portmanteau words of, you will see that they follow exactly the same form. So astronomy are the laws of stars, geography is the writing about the earth, geology is the study of the earth. So just from that structure, it's very clear. It's also very clear from the nature of the Pythagorean community, because the philosophia is the wisdom of love, which is friendship. Philia is friendship, which is different from eros, which is romantic or sexual love, and agape, which is divine love. And the Pythagoreans had this wonderful, in a way one could think of it as a pre-Christian community based on love, love thy neighbor as thyself. All property was shared, they were vegetarian, men and women had the same status. And all this bears out this meaning of the real meaning of philosophy. So then we're thinking, well, there's a whole direction which I'm hoping, again, I've talked about before and I will maybe come back to, which is about how the Pythagoreans go from there. But I just want to I'm going to just go through some quotes that, again, that I've used a lot, but they are really important. So the first is, all knowledge is human knowledge. I put a non because I've got a feeling someone famous was supposed to have said that, or anyway, but yeah, we have this idea that we know what things are by breaking them up, but what we've been doing for about 500 years, I guess, is looking at how things work, how things can work for us, not actually the nature of what things are, which was what was concerning humanity before the explosion of calculus coming from Cartesian geometry, coming from the zero coming into European culture and mathematics, which again I've written about and spoken about. But, so obviously very good things have come, a lot of useful things have come from that, and we've seen what a lot of damage has come from that as well, from basically from irresponsible usage of the knowledge. So I might do that one next, which is the T.S. Eliot one, which again, most of you will know from before, which is how much knowledge have we lost through gaining information? How much wisdom have we lost through gaining knowledge? Clearly, our culture is intent on information and knowledge, but whereas in the Pythagorean community, what was important was how it would be used, and that was why it was only the inner community, the esoterici, the inner ones, were the mathematici, they were the mathematical ones, and their work was in the wisdom of love. So they needed to develop morally and ethically, not just technically. And again, this is so what Rudolf Steiner says about the problems, which is that every step forward in technical knowledge needs to be balanced by 2 steps forward in moral understanding. This we've obviously not had for a very long time, and really needs to be rectified. And so we've been hell bent on progress, but as C.S. Lewis says, we all want progress, but if we're going in the wrong direction, the one who turns round first is most progressive. Okay, so that's kind of where I'm coming from. And as I was saying yesterday, I think it's very important to say where we're coming from. And this is something that is, again, not common now. This was, you see, Euclidean mathematics did that. It was the koine, and then the axioma, you had the common notion. So and Dirac did that in his principles of quantum mechanics, in fact, as well. So it's very important, actually. So I want to just look at a bit, etymology. I use etymology quite a lot. I like etymology, and so I thought it would be good actually to look at the etymology of etymology, and it's very nice because it's the study of the true, real, or actual meanings of words, and I discovered when I looked that up actually that it's that Socrates was there before me with etymology, and also thought it was important, so that's kind of nice. So now let's look at some etymology. So for example, science, it comes, let me see what it is. So it comes from Latin scire, to know, and it's separating one thing from another, distinguishing, which of course is very important. And this was obviously what you were talking about, Lou, in terms of laws and form, and obviously the combinatorial hierarchy. And it's very important for us to be able to do that. But it's not the only way of knowing. That is a knowing from myself as subject, and from the outside other, in terms of the way it's come in science actually is in terms of control. That's the whole thing about prediction, and we want to be able to control things. Another kind of knowing is, it's from the French connaissance, which we don't really have a word for it. I put acquaintance. It's the getting to know another, as in those of us of my generation or who were brought up with parents who used to do that. It was in The King and I, getting to know you, getting to know all about you. And this is the second person knowing, which again relates to the Pythagorean ethic of Christian, of loving one's neighbor as oneself, the respect of another as another being, and something happens there. And this is key. So I'm not saying not science. I'm saying we've forgotten, or we've downplayed, we've neglected connaissance, basically. Now, my subject is Pythagorean epistemology and connaissance. So I thought I'd look up the root of epistemology. Now, this is very interesting. So it's, epistemology, as we know, is the theory of knowledge. So I thought, well, yeah, what's episteme? And literally it means I overstand, which interestingly is the Latin root. So that's from epistemology. Episteme is from Greek. Superstition is from Latin. And that's overstood. And so I just think that is very, very interesting. And it contrasts with the beautiful 12th century Sarum prayer, which was, the Sarum prayer book was actually all over. So Sarum was Winchester, but it was the Diocese of Winchester, but it was actually all over England, this prayer book. And it's a beautiful, we learned this at school. And I want to sing it because we learnt it singing, and I think you'll probably remember it even more then. So let's see, I'll pluck up all my courage, and it goes, God be in my head and in my understanding, God be in mine eyes and in my looking, God be in my heart and in my thinking, God be at mine end and at my departure. And of course, this, as a child, I was thinking, this is very, very strange. I'll hold it up so you can see the words again. Oh, thank you, John. it's just I'm sure it's on the web, a much more beautiful version. But anyway, it's such a beautiful little song. So anyway, so they're the words. And as a child, obviously, what on earth is this? Yeah, God be in my head and in my understanding. I wasn't thinking about understanding or overstanding. Yeah. But God be in my heart and in my thinking. And of course, now, we know that there is heart thinking. We know that there is gut thinking. We know, just from all our neuroscientific experiments, research, that the heart is the most important organ. I mean, it puts together so much information. I mean, John Torday, you must know about this as well. I mean, it is amazing what the heart does, what the heart can do. So, and the gut as well. And this relates to the Pythagorean mathematics, Pythagorean philosophy, because it is a mathematics and a philosophy for humanity and human beings as whole human beings. The problem with our science is that it is, obviously it's mostly head-based, and again, it's not to do with relating to, it's about control over. I'm going to come back to this. So here we go. So let me just go into Pythagorean epistemology, which is starting from the great oneness, the monos, ineffable reality. It's the recognition that it is beyond us. We have little minds and it is beyond us, the whole. We are part of the whole. That we can begin to, that our beginnings of understanding are what I'm calling awareness. And that's when we are most open. So it goes, awareness is greater than consciousness. Consciousness is greater than language. Language is greater than reason. Reason is greater than logic. And they all include each other. And mathematics is a language. And so this, we know that, so awareness is where we can think out of the box. As I was saying yesterday, as babies, when we come in, we have huge awareness. From this, we develop consciousness, we develop language. But it's, what happens is that we come into a specific family, into a specific culture, into a specific language. And it's particularly obviously the specific culture, which is at a certain different, a certain time, a certain zeitgeist. And as such, our consciousness is limited by this. And this is why one hears this cry about thinking out of the box. And we know that so many of the great discoveries have come through dreams, through sleep. And this is when we are not focusing in this conscious way. Now, part of the Pythagorean approach is to be able to access that, to go into a more aware space, with not necessarily in sleep. There's what's his name? Peter Kingsley, that's right. Peter Kingsley is a very, very interesting academic who's written on a lot of different Greek thinkers, including Pythagoras. And he's also a mystic. And he talks about that the space that the ideas come from. And it's this, but so this zone from awareness to consciousness, I actually had an example of this recently. I'm very fortunate to have a garden and to be visited by birds in my garden. And there are wood pigeons, a pair of wood pigeons. Sometimes they come together, sometimes they don't. Recently, they're young, a couple of young have been coming with one of the other things. And I realized that I knew, I recognized wood pigeons. Wood pigeons. Stephen Wood, who unfortunately isn't with us now, who's he's in America, but he hasn't come on. I forgot to remind him. He's a biologist, and so some of you know. And he gave us a lovely talk when we were in Rowland's Castle at one time about the jizz of different birds and recognizing them by their nature in this way. And anyway, so I knew them, but particularly I knew they've got this white collar. And in fact, I started to realize that I'm not that conscious of them. I know them, but I hadn't been watching them that closely to be more conscious. And the first thing I noticed was that in fact the white doesn't go all the way around. It is actually like two bits of collar there. And then one time when they flew away, I saw that they have these white stripes on their wings. I thought, my goodness, I kind of knew that. I'd been aware of it, but I hadn't known it consciously. And I saw that something had moved. And so this is obviously, Goethean science is very much to do with this, is to do with observation in this kind of way. I am interested in, so that's called Goethean phenomenology. I'm really more interested in the alchemy. If anybody ever looks on my website, you'll see that I've got little aphorisms that have come under a little bird told me. One of them is that I say is that phenomenology is alchemy light, spelled L-I-T-E, because with phenomenology, there is still that sense of being outside, whereas when you're willing to go into the alchemical space, you are willing to create a relationship, you're open to a relationship. And this is very much where I think we really need to be going now. With all due respect, and I love all your sciences because I think they're amazing ideas. I just get scared about who they're used. So that's it. So maybe I'll keep going now because I am looking at a clock here as well, Barbara. So we can.
Thank you.
So we'll see if I might come back to the other steps through. So I'll put that on one side as a possibility. But I really, as one of my children says, I really, really, really want to come on to Martin Buber, because this is the area of connaissance. And I hope some of you, I'm sure some of you know the classic book of Martin Buber, which is I and Thou. And in it, he talks about the world of it, which is the third person world, and the world of I, thou, which is the second person world. And and as I put here, science and epistemology are in the third person, and connaissance is in the second person. And this is, again, so this is what I was just talking about now, about the fact that what we really need to do is develop relationship. We so need to develop relationships between each other, between human beings, and how do we relate just one to another, as couples and families? How do we relate in small communities? How do we relate in larger communities? This is really what we so need to do. This is what we so haven't done. And Martin Buber puts that in the context of relating to thou with a capital T, which is to the divine. So recognizing that we are part of this ineffable reality, and this is an intelligent reality, which I call God. I for a long time I couldn't use the word God because it sounded, normally it's seen as masculine, and obviously in a lot of religions God is masculine, but obviously the great godness is beyond gender. So, and this Rudolf Steiner actually has a very interesting, a lovely saying, which he says, because he is Christian, and obviously I don't think one needs to be Christian. C.S. Lewis, who was Christian, in one of his lovely Narnia books, at the end, probably is the last battle, like where people actually kind of go through this, the equivalent of the eye of the needle, in order to go, leave the world that's falling apart, and there's one chap who kind of comes up, and he'd been in a different religion, and he was saying no, he hadn't believed in Aslan at all. So I would, and Aslan's there saying no, you did believe in me. because that's what you were doing. You were following the path of love, and this is my one hope for the mess that the world is in, is that there is love in so many human hearts still, most human hearts. Some of them look pretty covered over, but we won't go there now. Anyway, so let me think something. Where I did digress. I'm looking at the clock again. So Martin Buber, so relationships, that we need to develop relationships. I think I was going to say more about that, but I'm also saying, oh no, I was starting to quote Rudolf Steiner. He said, not to believe in Christ is a misfortune, not to believe in God is an illness. And I seriously think that is the predominant illness, because if one, and Bob Dylan said it, you're going to have to serve somebody. Maybe the devil or it may be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody. And what has characterized the whole, science, technological progress is hubris. And the precautionary principle has been just thrown away. I mean, so many young people have never even heard of the precautionary principle. And we're seeing that big time at the moment, obviously. Now then, so now back to Pythagorean, and now Pythagorean epistemology now. So the reason Pythagorean, I'm talking about 21st century Pythagorean epistemology, is because in the 6th century BC, they were the pre-Socratic thinkers, including Pythagoras, were coming from what one could call more a state of connaissance. Other traditions, the Vedas or Stein, various traditions speak of it differently, but it is more that oneness with nature and the beings of nature, and nature as intelligent, Mother Nature and God, etc., coming from that into science, into being into this third person, the world of it, being able to control more. So that was very, very obviously very important in terms of a human development. And in the Pythagorean community, it was contained, as I've explained, ethically and morally. The problem was that the Pythagorean community was broken, and that was, in a way, as with Jesus. I mean, Jesus was not a. That was a different story, but probably anyway. But because he was seen as a threat politically, and as such, the knowledge got out. And it's there are sort of strange stories about, they were sort of so elitist, having this, closed circle, the esoteric circle, but it was not. It was just that people needed to show that they did want to develop in that way. The story, I mean, it was a local tyrant who wanted to buy his way in. And of course, Pythagoras, you can't buy your way in. It's, basically people who were really seriously drawn came, and then there was, they'd sort of hang around in whatever way. And at some point they were allowed to listen. They were allowed to become one of the acousmatically, the listeners. And this is very important as well, that it wasn't the observers, they were allowed to see, they were allowed to listen. And this is about, obviously, the Pythagorean mathematics as well. But the difference now is that we're coming from a society that, some people say, well, it's science is the new God. Science is not the God. Scientism is the God. Because, as I was saying yesterday, people say science says, science, doesn't say anything, as we've just heard with Mike. Science is about theories and then evidence and etc. etc. So we're looking at sort of, we've had relativity all this time, but hey, maybe in 10 years, what was relativity? No, it's quantized inertia. Who knows? But this is the problem, is that so science, but scientism has been the god, and it's materialist science. And again, I think I was saying this yesterday, the problem is materialism is not a problem. People choose to believe that basically, it's all random. There was a big bang and lots of things went and as a result, we're all. No, I think I've still got time. We're all kind of random molecules, etc. And and one could investigate that and say that's how things started, etc. Or one could say maybe matter and consciousness evolved together, or one could say maybe there was consciousness and out of that came matter in some way. Basically, what we've had is the problem with the materialism is it's assumed as fact, and that makes it an ideology. Well, actually, a superstition, really. Anyway, so the point about this as well is, of course, that they're not either or exclusive, or they're both and. We need both. And let me see, I thought I'd written something here, but maybe I didn't. I didn't see it. So, oh, right. Okay. No. I can go to this one. That's right. So this does relate to coming from awareness into consciousness. And something else that Rudolf Steiner said is that consciousness kills. And I mean, it's probably not a meaningless coincidence that we shoot pictures. We know that that when we fix something, when something comes into consciousness, we fixed it. That's this that Lou was talking about, the percept into the concept, and then we fixed it. But we need this. We need it for communication. It's making maps. But what happens is that we mistake the maps for the territory. And we see this with growing up. We see this, I mean, this is the thing, like half the thing about people going on holiday is to see things anew. Again, there's that lovely quote about, we don't really need new places, new sites, we need new eyes. And it's very, very interesting, often coming back from holiday, you go, golly, I hadn't noticed that before. Because we walk down the street and we're just walking. Well, obviously, and now, so many people are walking down with their headsets on, their phones on, or they might be just looking at their phone the whole time they walk. So consciousness kills, and so I've added awareness lives, and it's necessary for growing and out of the box learning and communion. And this is part of the connaissance, the Martin Buber's approach that we are going, that we need. I mean, he says we need to be able to be in the world of it. We need that for communication. But if we don't have the communion, if we don't have the second person relationship with other beings, then we are not truly alive. And because the thing about the world of it is that we're making outside into its, we also make ourselves into its. And I think this is probably something to do with my problem with the laws of form. This idea of self-reference in terms of, I think it is. I see it in that kind of way. It's not real self-reference. Now I wanted, let me just, so I'm going to do this quite quickly now. So here we go. This, again, most people have seen this before, and it's just that the normal mathematics that we have has excluded a lot of the mathematics that belong to the original Pythagorean time. And so it's predominantly quantitative, visual, and technical, whereas the Pythagorean was that, but also qualitative and musical and spiritual. So it's to do with, yeah, let's have a look. Again, so Pythagorean mathematics, Pythagorean philosophy is about how we are as human beings and able to behave scientifically, but also spiritually. And this is that's part of a very essential part of looking at this awareness, consciousness, those zones, the in-between zones, which maybe I'll talk about it in another ANPA session. But now, let me see. So I just want to emphasize this, that living unrepeatable experience is greater than repeatable experiment. And I think we've forgotten that. And yeah, so yeah, the intent of scientific experiments is controlled outcomes. The intent of human living is what we need to be really concerned with now, because it's been neglected so long. I've put question growing, creativity, meaning. Haven't gone into that as much as I thought I might, but maybe come back to that in conversation. I wrote from a paper last year. I looked at the beauty of mathematics and the mathematics of beauty, and there I was looking at which was actually a wonderful neuroscientific validation by a guy called Professor Zeki at University College London. And it's, but so I was looking at the Platonic beauty, truth, and good, or the good, and I put it into, I went back and I felt that the Pythagorean would be possibly a tetrahedron, which would be beauty, truth, harmony, and love. And I see that as is a worthy direction to think in terms of for human living. Again, I'll just point out that what's really, so human reality is heterogeneous, i.e. not reducible to quantitative number. What we've seen is, and also that this is very important. I know you've mentioned this sometimes, Peter, that we have this big thing about measuring as if it's beyond the senses, but it's actually basically elevates vision above the other senses, and it's actually a certain kind of vision. It's a vision that's closely, I think I put conflated. It's not really conflated with touch. It's closely connected with touch, not just vision, as in projected geometry has an other kind of vision. So that is really, really important. And I think there is a possibility in terms of Pythagorean mathematics to actually begin to think about the heterogeneity of our lives. And I mean, I think in a way you started something in that direction, John Torday, when you were talking about embryology. And maybe we'll look at that a bit more, but I'm looking time, because I just want to, I just wanted to look at, say that let's just, if we looked at non-European cultures, in Japan, Ma is really important, and Ma is silence, pregnant silence, and you'll obviously appreciate this, Barbara. It's that appreciation of silence and space, and again, that relates to awareness, our meditation of being able to go into that silent space, to receive in ways that we might never have conceived of receiving. And I want to give an example to say, like, again, last year, no, not last year, the year before in Liverpool, I spoke about the mathematics of the Maheshwara, and I just want to repeat, I've just written it here, so that the Maheshwara Mantra is that Maheshwara means great Lord, and it's the mantra of creation, and it's a second person mathematics of phonemes. It is actually, one is invoking extraordinary psycho-spiritual, physiological elements in one's being. So it's something that I've studied and practiced now for about 30 years. Golly, so ancient. Anyway, so I'll just show you it. Well, maybe I've got time just to say it very, very quickly, but anyone has to say it in a different kind of way. But it goes long nyamanganonam kapang karata kabagarata kapatafata tafata kapai shafaha ha it cuts that, not my name. And actually, yes, so I have 2 minutes. I would like to end with the same poem. Tired of all who come with words, but no language. I went to the snow-covered island. The wild doesn't have words. The unwritten pages spread themselves out in all directions. I come across the marks of rodeos hooves in snow. Language. No word. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you so much for reminding us that science is not just crushing numbers and making theories, but there is a lot of ethics that we sometimes don't like to think about. And I don't like the word morality, but ethics is definitely something that often gets divorced from what we are doing. So thank you very much to reminding us about that. Questions and comments, please.
Yeah,
Okay, go on. Yeah, go on, Philip.
Okay, and yeah, I'd like to thank you very much for the presentation and bringing in that other side of knowing, of connaissance. And I'd like to ask that a lot of science is based on freedom. So the freedom to see space and time, or the freedom how you make a measurement in quantum theory. And so it seems to me very scientific to include that freedom in how we know, and that it gives science its strength when you have a freedom, because it allows symmetry, it allows all sorts of approaches. And it seems to me we're missing something by not allowing that symmetry in the ways of knowing. And you mentioned Goethean science, which I've taught a lot, which is that in Goethean science, to find the form of something, you have to go into the experience of it. Because like in his work of color, he you can only understand the colors in their relation to each other by going into the experience of how does red feel in relation to yellow, and a color that it's harmonious with or has an affinity with, as opposed to a color that it's resistant to. And you can't theorize abstractly what the colors are. You have to go into that experience to find the language of color, which is kind of hidden in its experience. And so I'd like, to open up that surely science could allow that that there should be a time. Okay, we need to be disciplined in how we approach science, but surely there could be a kind of area that could be opened up for this sort of more expansive, open, unfocused knowing, to complement the focused knowing, and to kind of allow an integration of the two without making an opposition of the two ways.
Yeah. Oh, well, this is very nice, Philip. This is very nice. Yeah, I love the phrase "language of color." I think this is very important. I didn't actually, yeah. So I was, I had this these 5 levels of consciousness coming into language, and then into reason and into logic. And as you say, that the language of color, which comes from feeling it. I mean, that's what you see. I mean, Goethe and Newton, again, as you say, are complementary. They're not oppositional. It's their but obviously, if one only takes the Newtonian view, then you're just looking at numbers. Like yellow, that's just kind of like a certain waveband or frequency, and then red, that's another one. But we all know that they're actually very, very different. And yeah, to be able to work together. Oh, actually, Mike McCulloch, there was something. I'm going to replay that thing, because you were talking about something with like when the background radiation, or there was light in the background, that it was different. And I was thinking, this is Goethe. I only just started thinking about this yesterday, and I was not thinking about it at all. I didn't really get anywhere. But just the fact that like Goethe and Newton both saw rainbows and went in totally different ways. But Goethe has a very a big thing about where the light, about rainbows coming out of, the spectrum coming out of between light and dark, and whether well, obviously, as we know, when we actually see a rainbow, it's with the sun behind us. So this is very important.
Yeah, the amazing thing is that Goethe and Newton are both right. You can, quantify color and number, but at the same time, you can do the experiments the other way around and get the other spectrum, where you start from the dark and you get the yellow, cyan, and magenta, and that there's this freedom in knowing.
Yeah.
Yes. And that freedom has its own power. And so by respecting it, you're adding another dimension to, you're not diminishing something by reducing it or limiting it. You're adding another dimension, because you're adding a freedom and all that builds and upon that.
I think maybe because whenever anybody speaks about freedom, I immediately think responsibility, and but I think maybe if one has this, to the extent that one looks to complementarities, there is some kind of responsibility. Responsibility has to do with respect, isn't it?
Can I bring James into discussion?
Hi, James.
He's fainting, I think.
Yeah, please. Well, I mean, yeah, whoever, however.
Oh no! I'm very much enjoying the conversation. This just concepts of consciousness are more difficult than any physics problem I've ever worked on. I do have a question though. If I were to think of consciousness as, or at least elementary, the most elementary form of consciousness is some kind of awareness of the self versus the other. So that, let's say that's a rudimentary type of consciousness of some sort. We know medically that human beings who are brain dead, their immune systems continue to operate. And so that means that they're aware of the self versus other. That's what their job is, which means that to some extent it's not localizable. So my question to you is, does it make sense to ask where consciousness is? Or can you make some comments on that?
I don't know whether it, yeah, I mean, I don't know whether it does really. I mean, no, I probably don't. I mean, yeah, for me, I think consciousness is like a process. I mean, I was interested in your thing about the self and the other. There's an interesting book by a guy called Albert Sussman here, which is called the 12 Senses. And that's from, he's coming from a Steiner perspective. And he talks about, yeah, I think he talks about worms and sea urchins, no, not sea urchins, sea anemones, in terms of that initial awareness of self and other. And like, I think the sea anemone reacts to any touch and retracts, whereas the worm is able to distinguish whether it's being touched or reaching out to touch. Anyway, there's some kind of distinction which is kind of interesting about the nature of touch. So with consciousness, I think actually thinking about consciousness, I think one actually does need to think more about the different senses as well. I mean, I didn't know that about people who are brain dead and the immune system continuing to work. I mean, it doesn't surprise me. There are also obviously people who are brain dead who have like near-death experiences and things like that, and so are actually experiencing a lot of things which are not.
I'm not a medical doctor, so if I'm incorrect, let me know. But I've read that happens.
Yeah. Well, there's a group called the Scientific and Medical Network, which in a way they almost started like that, which was with a lot of different medics who had experience of patients who had been supposedly dead, but actually came back and then had actually been, their consciousness had been floating around the room, and they could say, look, I saw you do this, I saw this, it's happened, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of evidence for that. So
yeah, can I bring John Hyatt into discussion before we go over into near-death experiences?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, John.
I was just going to say that some of the most interesting stuff that I've read on consciousness lately, from the area of neuro psychoanalysis, is in a book called The Hidden Spring by Mark Solms, S-O-L-M-S. And I'd recommend everybody reads it because I think it's a bit of a game changer, and it's based on experimental evidence. And it sort of suggests that whereas science has thought that consciousness is to do with the cortex, therefore humans are above animals because we have a larger cortex, the latest experiments suggest that consciousness is generated in the brain stem. So it's a lot more ancient than previously thought. So I just suggest that's seriously the best book I've read for a long time. And certainly, Nicola, you'd be very interested in it, I think.
Thank you. Is it the hidden self?
The Hidden Spring,
The hidden spring, right?
as in,
Yeah, maybe John, you can put it in the chat
yeah,
so
sure.
people can download it if they want to. Thank you.
It came out in January.
Right. Lovely.
I think Lou is wanting to talk.
Yeah, sorry, I can't see all the screens, so please, Lou, please come in.
Okay. Oh, I'm unmuted. Yeah. So I have a question. I'm trying to formulate it. I had the impression that you said that from your point of view, there was a kind of a watershed at the invention of Cartesian geometry, at the invention at Descartes, that led away from Pythagorean mathematics. Is that right, the way you were thinking about it? And could you say more about it?
Right. Yeah. It was when zero came in, it was actually to do with the conflation of number and line. Because before, I mean, in fact, it had already started a bit. I mean, it had started, you know, like with Diophantine equations, but obviously for Pythagoreans, number meant discrete number, whole numbers, and you know, which was the subject of arithmeticae, which became arithmetic or number theory, and geometry. And geometry was the home of continuous lines.
But the Pythagoreans already had the scandal of the square root of 2 not being rational.
Yeah, I don't know that was, I'm not sure that was really, yeah, I mean, there are some, you know, there are stories about that, but it is, I mean, that was to do with ratios, but it, you know, not being ratios of whole numbers, but that was
a discordance between number as length and number as pure number.
Well, that's right. It was, in a way, that was already in geometry. That was already in the line. So, I mean, you know, obviously, there are problems or there are issues which are still of interest, as you know. We still talk about, you know, the discrete and the continuous, and how do we relate them. So that's not surprising. But I think that, yeah, but what happened was that, I mean, now the idea of whole numbers, it has been lost, really. Obviously with it, I mean, it started coming back in the 20th century, really, basically because of cryptography, because of business. I mean, zero came in from business, as we know as well. It was trade. It was in, you know, the Crusades saw the downfall of the feudal system, or initiated the downfall of the feudal system, but it saw the growth of trade, and this was, you know, that's how the Hindu-Arabic numerals came in initially, through business. And the mathematicians, some of them latched onto them, and some of them actually started saying, but what is this, etc., etc. But the number, but it was so powerful. The number line is such a powerful idea. I mean, you know, you've got mathematicians at the time, so, you know, I think it's Cardano saying, well, oh no, I mean, he's talking about, is he talking about?
But how do these advances shift away from the search for knowing? I think the search for knowing goes on and on. It always is there.
Yeah, no, but the thing was that before that, because it was, yeah, of course the search for knowing goes on, but it started, the change was from wanting to know the nature of reality as being, from how do things work. That was the question that came in with materialist science, and that's what grew. You know, it wasn't immediate, it was slow, but it was, you know, and we saw it, you know, sort of, so at one point, for you know, a long time, it was a heresy not to mention God in some kind of paper, and then there was a sort of switch when suddenly it was a heresy to mention God, yeah, but we so at the time of Chartres, we had things lighting up everything. At the time of Chartres, obviously, I mean, mathematics was greatly inhibited because they were using Roman numerals, and you know, once the Hindu-Arabic numerals came in, obviously so much more was possible. But at the same time, what happened was this you know, the growth of materialism, which was not actually thought through, and it was that was the problem. You know, I mean, that shift from asking what, you know, what is the nature, what is the being nature of reality or nature, etc., and what is, you know, how do things work, which is the fundamental scientific question now, is enormous.
It is enormous. Yeah.
Yeah.
A good example is I think of Richard Feynman as a highly enlightened scientist, but he also exemplifies the how do things work perfectly, absolutely perfectly.
Yeah.
In all his speaking of philosophy as should be on the side and so on.
Yeah.
And so you can see that there can be a kind of enlightenment in that, even though the person is speaking in a way that you don't like.
Yeah. I've got his, you know, there were these 3 volumes of his kind of like basic, you know, basic science, which is actually beautiful. And in particular, he talks about thunder and thunderclouds as families. I mean, and he shows how it really is true, that the way that thunderclouds work together and grow. I mean, you know, so yeah, as you say, he's, and this is, again, you know, I find, you know, like I said to Mike, I just like the idea, I just find it because I just see what all these mad people are doing. But you know, I'm in ANPA and I love what all you science people are doing, because of the love, and it's the love that's important. But I maintain that we do need to think wider, that, you know, the freedom and responsibility, you know, so I feel like saying what is it at the end of it? It's one of those Dickens ones. Oh, I know, I think it's the Christmas one, little Tom or something, says, God bless us all.
I think it's a perfect time for the break on that note. And as usual, I will leave Zoom working. So if you still want to talk, but I'm going to stop recording now.
Right.